So
I'm going to start recording now.
Let's do it. Go ahead.
Hey, gang, and welcome back to Alien Protocols. And this is kind of a dual show today with Dr. Simeon Hine. Dr. Hine, such a pleasure to see you as always.
Hey, buddy. Nice to see you again. Thanks for inviting me to another little fireside chat.
Yeah, this one's going to be a fun one, too, I think. I've really been battered lately by my assertion by pressing statistics and case evidence for a very strong case that extraterrestrials are peaceful. For the most part, the vast majority, they're peaceful, if not neutral, but even more so peaceful by their actions. And I've got tons of cases, and not just flim-flam cases, cases of the highest caliber with military witnesses and multiple radar tracks and validation of the evidence.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important question to talk about now. Now that we're facing, society is facing the reality that there are visitors. We've seen the videos from the Defense Department. We've seen the metal. This is a really important question. What's your take on the peaceful versus a threat aliens?
I think it's the single most important question we could be engaging right now, because we're just coming out with the topic. The TTSA people are doing their best to get it in front of Congress, and they've given us videos, and they're talking about samples, and it's only a matter of time before the broader mainstream pick up on this. And this is going to be the question, don't you think, is, well, who are these visitors? Where are they from? What are their intentions? And we're really behind the curve on this. We haven't talked about it as a society, really at all.
It's been suppressed. It's been suppressed for, over 60 years, at least. And we've spoken about this before, how the suppression. Yeah. Please go ahead.
No, I mean, it's extremely important topic. We need some education about this because, honestly, it could really be either way. I just don't have a lot of evidence that they're hostile, and I'm an evidence-based guy. And you've presented some evidence recently. You had a video a couple of days ago about the Colonel Coyne, Mansfield, Ohio helicopter incident, which we talked about earlier today.
Yeah.
Where, this thing comes from in 1973, Army, National Reserve, National Guard Reserve helicopter coming back with these guys from a physical. And this light comes at them from the horizon, the red light, and then comes to almost, they said, a dead stop right over the helicopter. And then some green light comes out, which wasn't just a light. They said it was like a pyramid shape that expanded. I mean, like at a rock concert, those really precise lasers. These things that doesn't seem hostile because as you pointed out in your video, they were very close to the ground. They were about 500 feet over the ground, and it pulled them up from the hills. And it was neutral, or it just seemed neutral at worst.
I think it was benevolent, clearly benevolent, in my opinion, because from my understanding of the incident, the craft was approaching like this. The UFO was here, and the pilot was really scared, so he put the copter in a steep dive, not just a dive, but like a really steep dive.
Yeah, and it was steep as you can get. The collective was full down, they said. Colonel Coyne.
Wow. So there's no doubt in my mind that the UFO thought that something's wrong with the craft, or worried that the craft was going to crash, or that they were in a dangerous position since they were diving so quickly. So my belief is that the craft used this tractor beam and pulled them from 1,700 feet up to 3,500 feet, almost doubled their altitude, and then waited until the craft was safe and then let it go. And I think that's a very benevolent act. I think it's at least conceivable that the UFO or the extraterrestrial intelligences or the computer was programmed with protocols that said if something's going to, it's kind of like that famous robot. What are the 3 rules of robots? It's like you can't kill, you can't allow someone else to be killed, and you can't break number 1 or number 2 rules or something like that. I forget what it is. But maybe it's programmed with a, protection of life, maybe kind of thing. Or I don't know. It just seemed like a very benevolent act. It wasn't neutral. Neutral would have been like, hey, let it crash or let it escape or do nothing. But it seemed very benevolent to me. That
Yeah, you know, that's one interpretation of it. It's really hard to say exactly what was going on there, but they definitely put it in a steep dive, as steep as it could go, and they were descending. And we were saying earlier today that this was quite a synchronicity for me. I've just been reading about this incident in Peter Sturrock's book, The UFO Enigma, from 1997.
Yes.
I believe 97, 98. And I heard about this book from Hal Puthoff at the SSE IRBA conference because he said, wow, this is a good book. It's still a good book. And I thought I should check it out. And it's fascinating. And it had a really long chapter on this Mansfield, Ohio incident with lots of investigators and the ground witnesses, the family in the car, who saw exactly what the pilots reported. And there's no conventional explanation for something that could move at 600 knots from the horizon, which is a fast speed for a vehicle. I mean, that's an aircraft at, full speed, a jumbo jet at full speed. Then it comes to a near stop, 100 feet over their helicopter from way off, 65 feet in front. That's what the estimates were with the trigonometry. 100 feet above, 65 feet at a dead stop. The tractor beam comes out or whatever it is. They feel some turbulence, and all of a sudden they notice they're at 3,500 feet. The compass is spinning around. It didn't stop after the object left. The radios stopped working. They couldn't contact Mansfield. They couldn't contact, which was only 8 miles away, but they could contact some radio towers. I mean, some military bases farther away. Wow. There were a whole host of things, like you say, walking Skinwalker Ranch. It's the same thing. It's very weird electromagnetic activity, and Jacques Vallée personally told me that he had talked to the crew, and he said, what they didn't tell you was that they had an increase in psychic activity before the incident.
Before it happened.
And afterwards.
Wow.
And he said to me, I'm going to say exactly what he said. This is why I don't believe that these are just men who get in their little metal spacecraft from far away and come over here. There's something deeper going on because of the psychic activity associated. Now,
the precognition. That's so weird.
Talking about fear and what could scare people. I mean, what are we dealing with here? Because it is so far beyond conventional, buddy. I mean, it is another realm. It crosses into RV, electromagnetics.
I mean, this is such a great case.
Yeah, what looks like a submarine in the air but has no means of propulsion? It reminds you of the Tic Tac.
What is the tractor beam? Exactly what physics are being used? Physics can cause the compass to spin for an extended period of time like that. These are clues and little bits of evidence that, UFOs are harbingers. They're harbingers of a lot of different things, not just the fact that we're not alone in the universe, but they're harbingers about how little we know about science and technology. And all these little things are clues. And I just think if we comprehensively studied these clues, we could put together the pieces, because this technology is so far ahead of us. It has multiple different aspects of that technology. I think that sometimes we just lump all into one thing. Like some aspects are electromagnetic, some aspects are this consciousness aspect, some are, precognitive or, non-local, non-time fixed. There's all these different fascinating aspects. Like I was thinking about this, a advanced civilization not just has advanced technology for anti-gravity, but they have advanced computing knowledge. Imagine computing skills just 500 years ahead of now. Imagine what that could do if you have the right sensory input. Imagine what you could do with that type of computing. You could do predictive behavior maybe on a scale that would seem like psychicness, pure magic. You could, it's just mind-boggling. This case is so cool.
No, it's true. I mean, this is why I think the discussion, if they're friendly or not, isn't the right question. Because it's so far advanced in us, it doesn't even seem like the relevant question to me, for the most part, because we're not even talking about something that's in the realm of 100 years or 200 years ahead of us. We're talking about something that's 1,000 years ahead of us. And when we encounter civilizations in the Amazon that haven't encountered any Westerners, there's still about, I guess, what is it? A number of tribes in the Amazon, 20, 30 that have still haven't encountered Westerners. They live it. I mean, and they encounter us. I mean, obviously, if we were hostile, they wouldn't be there. They're trying to protect these indigenous peoples.
Yes.
It doesn't seem to me the right question, because these are obviously technologies that could have wiped us out in a minute.
Yeah.
Hundreds of years. Why wouldn't you have done it already? If they were hostile, why wouldn't it have happened already? Now, it's such a big question because we know people have abduction experiences. They've experienced pain.
Yeah.
They experience stress and fear.
Well, I have.
So do animals when we tag them and sedate them to study them.
Yes.
In the woods.
Because we care about them. We care about them.
We want to find out where they're going in the ocean, and they capture them and tag them. And they may experience that, but it's not because we're trying to harm them. We're trying to learn about them so we can save them. So we don't really know. It's an unanswered question, and until we get more data and evidence, we won't know the answer to what is going on. But I would say that you should just look at the opportunity here. I haven't had those negative experiences that people have had. I've had an abduction experience, and it was just neutral. It just felt like meeting old friends I hadn't seen in a long, long time. They were small, and they looked like my friends from kindergarten. And I had the feeling of being sedated and put on a metal table. All of this stuff, but nothing felt negative. It just seemed like a neutral scientific procedure. They're trying to learn something. There was like a brain scan and all. Anyway, I wrote about this in Opening Minds. It happened while I was at Farsight, while I was sleeping. And when I woke up, I couldn't be sure what had happened. But people seem to think that I didn't look quite right. And it was a dream that was unforgettable. I mean, it was so real. But anyway, I'm just saying, people have all sorts of experiences. We should hold off judgment until we have more information.
I think you bring up a really good point, and I am one to think that for the most part we need to hold back judgment, but we shouldn't make assertions like they're a threat. That just puts us, I think, in terms of a learning curve, in a bad position. I think in terms of abductions and UFO experiences, this is this great study that just came out, Beyond UFOs. It's a meta study from the Free Foundation. And they have tons of experts here with tons of different studies and papers that have been done. And what they've discovered is from these mega surveys of experiencers that the vast, vast, vast majority, like 86%, are positive experiences. Not only that, there's a tremendous number of, in the case history, of healings.
Yes,
and
that's right.
With psychic powers.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up.
People left with improvements and things like that. Medical provable healings,
right?
Not just, I think abductions, oftentimes people have a tendency to discount them because of the nature of dreams and all that different stuff. And but let's say you discount all of the abduction case history, but if you do want to include it, the majority are positive. There's so many other incidents that I think can be I just don't think they can be categorized as neutral. And I think that's a position a lot of people want to say, is that, maybe they're neutral. Maybe they're like a zookeeper, or maybe they're like us with those indigenous tribes. Zookeepers much more active than like we are to these, indigenous tribes in the rainforest and stuff. But maybe, I don't know. I just keep having this feeling that when you look at case histories like the pilots who've encountered UFOs and the pilots have tried to lock on their weapon system, case after case, Peru, Venezuela, Belgium, Iran, the famous Iran case, the Nimitz case. These are just military cases that we know about. We are the hostile ones. We try to lock on weapon systems onto them, and they shut off just our weapon systems and not the avionics. Don't threaten the life of the pilot and then leave. I don't know if that's...
buddy, it's true in those cases, but I know of a number of other cases where the pilots have disappeared for good.
I've heard those too. I haven't seen strong evidence for those.
No, it's there's one in Black Swan Ghosts where the pilots did attempt to lock on over an object over Lake Superior in the 60s. I heard this from the son of the guy that ordered the attack on the UFO. I mean, the thing came in over Canada and the Canadian.
Oh, I'm losing you. Looks like someone locked onto us for a second there. Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. You're back.
Yeah, I can, yeah. Yeah, this was a case where this large object came in from Canada and the Finland Air Force Base. They launched two F-104s to track it.
I really want to hear that. I don't know if you could hear me, but I lost you there for that whole story about the plane on Michigan.
Okay, can you hear me again?
Over Lake Michigan, and they locked on, and then it went out. Did you hear me?
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
I can hear you now. Yes. So what happened? I'm sorry to make you repeat it, but
so this I'm told this from the guy whose dad had the authority to launch fighters from Finland Air Force Base, an Air Force base in the 60s on Lake Superior, and he heard his dad telling this story to his buddies one night while he was up in his room. He heard it coming in from the kitchen, but basically this object had come in over Canada. The Canadians notified the American Air Force, this object's coming in, it's not responding to communications. They attempted to communicate many times and it wouldn't communicate. So they launched two F-104s, and this guy's father gave the authorization to launch missiles at it.
Wow.
And at that exact moment, both F-104s lost their engines. Both of them simultaneously, and went into Lake Superior.
Wow.
And the object took off at a very high speed. It just basically, in the one sweep of the radar, was gone. And this guy later ran into another buddy of his in the same field that he works in. And this guy had been in Finland Air Force Base that night and knew about this incident. And he told this individual who told me the story that they never found the pilots. They found the planes at the bottom of Lake Superior, but there were no pilots in the planes.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
There are cases like there's cases in Vietnam. I remember hearing a case where they would send up there were these objects that would come over Vietnam on a regular basis, and they launched a jet fighter to go after one of these. And the last thing they heard was the pilot sort of screaming, and the blips merged, and the planes just, we've heard about this before, but you're kind of right. This is cases where the pilot was launching weapons at these craft, and in many cases, like the Peruvian case with Oscar Santamaria, the object didn't retaliate. It just absorbed all those 30-millimeter rounds. I remember he was at the citizen hearing. I remember him describing this. It was riveting. I mean, he has this dogfight with
unloaded.
It's
came back
above
around.
him. He's going up. He said he got ticked off because he was like the #1 pilot in Peru, and Sukhoi 22. Like, they were allies of Russia, the Soviet Union. So they had the Soviet military. He said when he was diving at the thing, I mean, he couldn't catch it. Eventually, just released all his 30-millimeter rounds, each of which could have destroyed a truck, and nothing happened. It absorbed. They go out in a spiral, but the ones that hit just absorbed.
It's amazing. You wonder, what technology is that? I mean, is there any kind of electromagnetic field that's possible that could just incinerate them, but still allow you to see the craft through it?
Well, he said it absorbed it. The skin of the craft absorbed the rounds. I mean, what kind of material can absorb a 30-millimeter shell that's designed to take out a tank or a truck and keep flying like it did? And this was, and there were 1,800 witnesses on the ground.
What if you designed? Wow, so many witnesses.
there's a Defense Intelligence Agency report about this because someone did a FOIA and the DIA talked about this whole case. There's records of it. We know this really happened. So I forget when did that incident happen, in the 80s or something?
I think that was the late 70s, I think.
Late 70s. Yeah. So what kind of technology exists?
Well, think about this. If you build a craft, you're not going to want the skin to be, soft. You want it to be able to maybe even absorb a micrometeorite impact.
Yeah, you're maybe right. Right.
So an incredible velocity of a micrometeorite would be, at least commensurate with a 30 millimeter round on some occasions, you might imagine. But, another thing, it's
complex. I'm going to take Stephen Greer's position on this, which is that if they are hostile, that's even more reason why we need to get them down here and have a conversation.
Absolutely. I agree completely. I also look at the nuclear cases. And when you think about the nuclear cases, I think there's oftentimes a misconception when people think about how often UFOs appear at nuclear missile sites. And it's not just Maelstrom and Minot in the Russian case. This is around nuclear submarines, bases that hold nuclear weapons. In fact, I was one of the few people, and I'm still one of the very few people talking about the Maelstrom case from this year. It was seen again, and I'll just say it right out on the air. I had some documents, and I've had access to some documents that said several Defense Department locations that have had repeated visitation over the past 10 years, to the point where they've set up some equipment specifically for looking for these craft there. And Malmstrom is one of those locations. Malmstrom, this year, that caused a blackout. And it was such a substantial incident that somebody spoke to ex-Senator, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid about it. And Harry Reid mentioned this case this year in New York Magazine. He said, I have the exact quote here. And listen to this quote. This is a very interesting quote. And remember, he wouldn't bring this up for no reason. Harry Reid wouldn't just, try and scare us for no reason and mention this topic here. I'll find it over here. They asked him about, what about UFOs? And he said, give me 2 seconds. Read the reports. Here we go. The question from the reporter, what's the most compelling evidence to support asking the question whether there's UFOs? Read the reports. Read the reports. We have hundreds, Eric. 2-3 weeks ago, maybe a month now, up in Montana, they had another strange deal at a missile base up there. It goes on all the time. That's ex-Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who launched the ATIP program and all that stuff. He said there's a strange deal there. No one's investigating this major case. UFOs are interested in radioactive materials for what reason? Most people think, is it because of nuclear war and they're trying to protect us because of nuclear war? Tom DeLonge says that they've been trying to instigate nuclear war by turning on missiles, which is another one of his justifications for calling them a threat. And I think, and I take the position that, of course, it's the opposite, that they care about this biosphere like a zookeeper would care about the environment, and that radioactive materials are the worst pollutants on the planet. By far the worst pollutants. So I think they're looking at it at a pollution level, not like a nuclear war level. I think, there's a lot of important things that we can learn by their behavior and by the places that they, we can't find out everything, but we can get some hints about things, about their motivations and things like that by their behavior. And I think the nuclear basis is a very deep insight into their psychology. What do you think about that? Do you think that's indicative of something deeper about their psychology plans?
Yeah, no, they have a deep concern about atomic weaponry, and they have been, they call it tampering. I don't know what the right word is. I think they're drawing our awareness to these, and they're saying, we don't like these. I mean, why else would they turn off flights of missiles 10 at a time? Over and over again. Now, there were cases, in the Ukraine, they did in 83, I believe, at one of the Soviet missile installations, they initiated the launch sequence. There was a 100-foot disc Paul Stonehill talked about this, and I've heard about it from people that talked to people who were in charge there at the time. They initiated the launch sequence down to 30 seconds to launch. I mean, the guys who were in charge of that, apparently their hair turned white instantly. They couldn't shut it off, and it turns on. We're the ones with the nuclear weapons, not them. We're the ones who are creating the threat. We're so lucky that those things weren't launched in our lifetimes, apart from what happened to Japan during World War II.
Yes.
And that was the 509th Bomb Group, by the way. And it's no wonder that that's where the craft started showing up. I mean, I think there's a tendency to project our own hostility onto these entities. Because if they had wanted those things to launch, they would have launched them already. They couldn't figure out how to turn those missiles off in the Ukraine.
Sure.
I know that because I spoke to Richard Hoover, who spoke to the guy that was in charge of the Kurchatov Institute, which is their umbrella nuclear research weaponry organization. In the Soviet Union, it was one organization that did nuclear power and nuclear missiles. And everything nuclear was Kurchatov Institute. And this guy was in charge of the Kurchatov Institute. And he told us to Hoover. It's in Black Swan Ghost. I talked to Richard Hoover extensively at one of the UFO conferences discussing it. But they shut it off again after 30 seconds. So I don't accept Tom DeLonge's notion. I don't know where he's getting this from, that they're trying to cause a war between the Soviet Union at the time and the United States. I think nothing could be farther from the truth.
I agree so much.
Where is he getting this stuff from? I mean,
I think it fits a model that has financial motives. And that model is, if you demonize the AAVs and you call them a threat, it inspires people to want to invest in defense of this threat or recreation of this threat. There's no money in peace, lobbying for peace. There's no money in lobbying for communication. And to me, here's the real irony. Here's the real irony. They're going after the technology for the parts and for the pieces, for the material science to build weapons and stuff. And that's their objective. They want the nuts and bolts. They want the science. They want the science. Well, you know what? You can get more of the science, I believe, from communication and deeper levels of the science from communication than you can from confrontation. Sure, you can understand a microwave to a certain degree if you smash it on the ground, and maybe you can understand how the pieces go together. But if you speak to the manufacturer of a microwave, you're probably going to learn a lot more, you know? And it just seems so nearsighted. It seems so against everything we were taught as kids by our parents. Like, don't fight first. Try to converse first. Try to communicate first. Of course, protect yourself. Don't be a sissy. Protect yourself. Fight if you need to fight. But communicate first, you know? And that's the highest calling of humanity. I think that's our best, you know, when we're at our best, we communicate and we fight fear and go for the communication. You know, when you and I were talking about being out in the woods before, we got on the air and talking about bears and things that scare you. You know, you could blast a bear the first second you see a wild bear in the woods, but, you know, maybe you could wait a minute to see what the relationship is. You could learn a little bit about the bear activity and all that stuff before you make some rash decision to blast away. I don't know. What do you think about communication?
No, I agree. I mean, you know, some people have said that the greatest power requires the lightest touch. And using force is weakness. I mean, if that's all you're doing, that means you don't have any other options. And when you're out of options, that's when you're weakest. The whole point of having strength is that you don't need to use it. And so this is why when you go to force first, it's because you don't know what you're doing. It's the lack of skill. It's the lack of skill. And what you're saying to us is we were taught in Western civilization is that we're here to develop ourselves and our skills and our souls and our humanity. It's a kind of a cross-religious sort of manifesto about human development. I mean, we all have this, whether it's Judeo-Christianity or Islam. There's an idea of development being held to this higher expectation, whether it's from God or wherever it's from. And if we don't if we abandon those values, then we're sinking to a lower level, because real social development is the things that took us so many years to learn as children about sharing and communicating. And it's so easy just to react out of fear and then want to weaponize this whole area. But I'm afraid that what you're saying is true. There's no profit to be made from
peace.
Well, there will be, but easier.
Here's an example. There is a way to get money out of communication. Yeah. And immediate money. Let's say there are groups, and there are CE5 groups around the world who have regular, verifiable occurrences that happen over and over again. You could set up some communication scenarios there, okay? And let's say you even have a distant sighting that happens irregularly. You can use that occurrence to garner scientific information about the whole of the craft. You can do optical spectrometry. If you can see a craft, you can do optical spectrometry off of it and measurements from it. You could do entropy tests. You could have baseline before, baseline during, and after. You could be doing a bunch of consciousness tests during these events with the CE5 people. You could be learning all of this scientific data and information from trying to communicate. I think there's so many benefits of trying to communicate.
Yeah, that's I got to go back to something though that Hal Puthoff told us at the SSE Urban meeting. He said that in ATIP, the T, the threat, does not stand for threats from ETs. If you go back to listen to his talk, he says the threat is not ETs. It's other adversaries of the United States developing these things as a technology before we do. He said there's no evidence that these Tic Tacs, since that's all they're really talking about at the moment, even though in the Peter Sturrock book, they mention how testing these materials way back in 1990. And I really appreciate Hal. I like Hal. I've enjoyed every conversation I've ever had with him at these meetings. But I didn't know that he was doing this way back in 1990. I mean, Hal
was doing it in 96 with Dr. Hari at Carnegie Science is where he was doing it. In fact, I've got the pictures, some new pictures that have just been released. Of course, there's the famous older picture of the Tic Tac. The piece of metal that he has shown and Linda has shown. Let me see if I can find a quick picture.
But buddy, can we say categorically there's no evidence those Tic Tacs were hostile? Not a shred of evidence?
Not a shred of evidence. And over numerous cases, and I've looked at a couple of the other cases, there's no evidence that they've been hostile. In fact, no. I don't know what you would call it, but if someone is hostile to you and you turn the other cheek and you don't respond, what would you call that? I wouldn't call that neutral. I wouldn't quite call that peaceful. Well, maybe I would call that peaceful. If someone attacks you and you turn the other cheek, that's pretty darn peaceful. That's pretty Christ-like, That's what Christ tells you to do, is to turn the other cheek. If you're struck, turn the other cheek, let them strike you again, It seems so incredibly peaceful. Well, let me show you that the metal really quick. This is a picture that has not been out in the public until just a couple of days ago. That's the dark side and the shiny side of the material. And if you look really carefully, I think you've heard the metal content of it. It's extrasolar origin. They were able to tell that. It was first examined by Dr. Hari and Hal Puthoff. It was at Carnegie Science for quite a while in 96. It's got alternating layers of 2 microns of bismuth and 150 micron alloy of magnesium. And the magnesium has 97.6% magnesium and 2.4% zinc. There's some really cool, here's the data on each side. Let me get it at an angle there. There you go. There's a shine, the dark side, and they both have 2 different compositions. I think they just did the surface layer, a test of it. But then this is a picture I love, is the scanning electron microscope image of the side of that. Look at that. I thought it was really interesting how wavy each of the layers were, and if that waviness was indicative of the trauma the craft received.
Yeah, this is what we've been told.
But it's actually that wavy from the manufacturing for wave resonance, or is it?
It's the stress of a crash.
So they were straight lines before, and the crash.
I believe that's what somebody told me. I can't remember who exactly it was. It was someone that had handled the material. I won't mention who it was, and he told me.
Wow.
Someone who analyzed that piece or something very similar told me. I asked him the same thing, and he said, "Oh no, that's from the trauma of an impact."
Wow. I hear there's a 5-foot piece of that material, and it might be at Sandia. That's a certain rumor that I heard.
Now,
but back to the communication. No. Go ahead, please.
I've talked to people who've handled the materials, and I'm not talking about Hal.
Interesting. What type of materials, what sizes? Have you heard about the 5-foot piece?
This person told me that the piece they were given, if they projected it into in their mind, it would form a disc. It would be a huge wall of a curved shape, and it was 1,000 years ahead of where we're at. They said it was. They said it interacted directly with the quantum field to make the field ahead of the craft less dense, and to make it more dense behind the craft so that it would move like a puck on ice.
Alcubierre Drive, essentially. Exactly. Alcubierre Drive, right?
And I mean, what we're talking about is so sensitive, buddy. I wish I could go into names and more details, but these people, they are there. I mean, and I have to say, Steve Bassett said this of Paradigm Research Group. He goes, how come you go to cocktail parties and you can talk to people who've handled these materials? It happened to me at a cocktail party. I encountered a very well-known scientist, world class, who just started opening up about it when I was talking about crop circles, but then told me not to repeat it again ever. And so that's what Steve Bassett said. How come you go to cocktail parties, you run into these people, they'll tell you about the materials, the isotopes that are not found on Earth. There's no way it could be made here. It's not possible to make such a thing on the planet with those materials. It's 1,000 years ahead of where we're at. And then they say, well, by the way, don't mention it again. It's classified. What? And this is what happened to me. This happened to me, buddy. This happened to me. Wow. I just wish I could open up more about this. I just feel like these people trusted me.
Yeah, well, I don't want to pry, but even though there's like 10 questions I want to pry, I'm not going to out of respect.
I'm telling you the basics of it. This person told me there is 0 chance it was made on Earth. Okay?
Yeah.
We don't have that technology. We don't have those isotopes. And so we heard about it publicly from Hal. So this is why I'm opening up a little bit. I mean, Hal's talked about it. We've heard about one type of material from the TTSA group. We don't know how many other materials are being looked at. And I'm sure that the reason we're hearing about the bismuth magnesium is that's already pretty old. That's from Roswell or something like that. And the stuff that's even more recent than that, we're probably not even hearing about. But I think it's a big mistake because it could be inspiring the imagination of little kids to wonder, how does that work? Daddy, tell me how that works. And Daddy's going to say, I don't know. Maybe I'll grow up one day and be an engineer and figure it out. And that little kid will. And we're not doing that. And we're losing the technological edge. This is exactly what Hal said at the SSE meeting. There's a drawback to this type of classification and compartmentalization, which is a loss of economic and technological progress. And the perfect example of that is during the 50s, the United States surpassed the Soviet Union in electronics, even though they both started out at the same level, because the Soviet Union was so compartmentalized, right? And everything was so secure, classified there. And one person, and they lost the electronics edge, but our stuff was open industry, And so
suppressing it, we really do damage the imaginations, the dreaming of young kids who hear about a mystery and want to solve the mystery. To hear about science, this is a great way to get people excited about science and dreaming again. You know, when humans dream, we create. And when we create, we transform society in leaps and bounds. And this whole phenomena represents leaps and bounds, not only in science, but in culture, in society, in all these different ways, in philosophy, in astronomy, in so many different ways. The suppression of this evidence really stunts humanity. But not only that, not only does it stunt our ability to grow in all these other areas, it creates a danger. It creates this lack of education that an event that cannot be suppressed, it could cause, you know, more stress for society, more difficulties for society because we've suppressed it all these years. You know, if we would have let this information out, religion would have more of a chance to battle through the many different consequences of this. You know, astronomers and cosmologists could weigh out the Drake equation and work out, you know, new aspects of it. Physicists could look at the physics more. How do they do the tractor beams? How the hell can these things still spin? How do they know that someone's about to fire a weapon? You know, we're losing out on all the young kids, just like you're saying and Hal was saying, imagining about all these things and problem solving and the mysteries and
and you have to give the TTSA people credit for recognizing that and wanting to move it into a public benefits corporation so that it can't be reclassified. It can never be reclassified after it goes to TTSA because it's technically owned by the public. That's the type of company it is, and they're right. That's exactly their point. But they're doing, I think, everything they can to bring this forward. Whether some of them talk about it as a threat or not, I think that goes with the territory of having worked in the Department of Defense and the different intelligence agencies. That's how people like that see the world, and I don't think they'll ever see it differently. But they're just working on one component of that. You know, the rest of us have to do our job to insist that this become a topic of public discussion for the exact reasons that you just mentioned.
It's so important on so many levels. It just seems kind of ridiculous. What this, you know, when you think about it, Dr. Hine, why would a society allow their craft to crash so often? It sounds a little fishy that these craft could travel through space and crash here so regularly. It almost leaves you suspicious that these craft and these appearances are happening on purpose. And if you judge them by their actions and you include the possibility that these crashes are on purpose, it opens up all sorts of doors and questions. And it makes you wonder, are they trying to increase our technological growth rate, and why? Does that seem like logical to you?
It's a very good point. And that could be. Yeah, no, we do this all the time. We crash our craft. We just crashed Cassini into Jupiter, right? The Cassini craft. We crashed these things. We crashed one into Kayabashi asteroid or something like that.
Yes, we just did. Yeah.
Yeah, we do this, and if there are beings there, they're going to look at this, and if there are worms, they're going to say, "Ooh, can we eat it?" But if they're like us, they're going to think, "Ooh, how does it work?" And if we can't figure it out, another 1,000 years will go by, and maybe it is deliberate. I mean,
maybe they're studying us, studying them. I mean, that's really what they're doing. Maybe they're saying, how would they react? What would they do? Maybe they're trying to seed our technology for something they foresee happening in the future.
You know, where we're at, buddy, is we're not even at the stage of being able to ask questions like you're asking, because we haven't had a definitive authority in the United States come forward and say it's real, which gives us a license to talk about it without being accused of being kooks and having it hurt our jobs or our public life. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I mean, because the questions you're asking are the right questions, but we're not there yet as a society because we haven't. The first step we need to do is give complete amnesty to any witness to this phenomenon.
Agreed.
Any branch of the government, so that they all come forward, including the 200 or 300 Tic Tac witnesses who were on those ships in the Nimitz strike group,
Yeah.
It shouldn't be you bringing out one name at a time. We need these people to come forward, and Congress has to pass a law that gives complete amnesty to these UFO witnesses so they can come forward and tell us what they've seen without feeling like it's going to hurt their career. Just like we don't allow.
And not only that, I think also people who are in charge of UFO projects in the past who might have done illegal things or things like that, they should be given complete amnesty to come out.
I agree. I agree. We're not going to get any movement on this if the people that are involved think that they're going to go to jail.
Yeah.
But if we really don't want to have a Sputnik moment where we wake up one day and we find out another country on Earth has surpassed us in their science and development of this technology, we need to open the doors here and do it now and just let the discussion start. We have all these forums, we have the internet, we have reality TV shows and all these mechanisms now where we could be playing out and fleshing out this topic, entertainment in science, ethical considerations. We shouldn't accept when TTSA says it's a threat. Tom DeLonge or anyone. That's just one of 100 possibilities. The whole thing needs to be fleshed out in the way that we're so good at in the West, which is with evidence, with procedure.
And we're being denied that evidence.
Rules of order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. And we're being
we need the evidence, and we need to bring it out and have congressional hearings about this for many years to figure out what do we know so far as a country. We should work with other countries on this too. It can be done. I worked at a research institute in Vienna in 1989 that was started by the Soviet Union and the United States to see if there was something that they could come together on that had nothing to do with politics or warfare, and it was about climate change. We can all benefit from talking about climate change. There's no military advantage or disadvantage either way. And this is one of those topics that we should start bringing out to the best of our ability. I realize it does have potential implications in security, which is what some of the TTSA people, Luis Elizondo and Chris Mellon have talked about. But if we don't get a handle on the process for bringing this out, we're going to be here in 10 years in the same situation where we're not talking about it, and you have to be the one on your YouTube channel to bring out another witness, and then there's a lot of acrimony because people say, wait a minute, she's private, and you say, no, she served in the military, it's public expenditure. Why don't we just move forward on this? I think we can agree that that's what we need to do. And I'll tell you, the representatives at the citizen hearing, Merrill Cook of Utah came to the same conclusion. He was convinced by the evidence, and he went to his colleagues in Congress and said, how come we don't have congressional hearings about this, about the special access programs? Where's the money going? Yeah. And he said at the UFO conference in Scottsdale, the Open Minds Conference, you can watch it on videotape, because I talked to Merrill at the citizen hearing quite a bit. I called him on the phone. I talked to him on the phone later on. Wow. He said he talked to his colleagues in Congress, and they said, Merrill, we know about this, but if we come forward, we're going to lose our reelection money that we get from the special access programs. In other words, the special access programs have earmarked money to keep this quiet. And this is where we're at. You know,
well, there's been
yeah, go ahead.
Grant Cameron was saying that a lot of these special access projects who deal with this issue spend more money on security and like disinformation than actual research.
And that's what Richard Doty told Stephen Greer in the Unacknowledged documentary that you can see on iTunes, which I still think is one of the best. I told Mike Mazzata, the director of that, I thought it was one of the best UFO documentaries ever.
Absolutely.
Mike, he's a great guy. I ran into him at a couple of these conferences, and he was really, he just did his best on it. And this is what Richard Doty admitted to us. And so if what Grant is telling you is true, that they spend more on PR and public, disinformation, I mean, then we've got a real problem here, because we're spending public tax money to disinform ourselves. We can't just keep going around in a circle on this topic. Someone's going to have to get the guts. And again, the TTSA people are the people so far who've done it, like it or not. We don't agree with everything that they've said, but they.
Well, you know, when you look at the mechanics, of TTSA and how the DOD videos were released,
Yeah.
they weren't just released by one newspaper that first day, by the Washington Post. It was Politico, Huffington Post, everything on the first day. There are people behind the scenes in the Department of Defense that are part of the disclosure process. They initiated then to deliver those Defense Department videos. They're starting the disclosure process. And it's kind of obvious to me that they're doing a slow rolling disclosure process. But I'm one of those who feel that that slow rolling timetable is very society handicapped and ill prepared to handle this situation. You know, this is going to cause a tailspin in some countries. It's going to cause a big religious tailspin.
I know.
And it makes me, you know, back to the communication issue, just for a real quick moment. I think that, you know, if they wanted to communicate with us, they could speak in English to us. Obviously, they're smart enough to have translated our language and know our language. But it's also evident in a lot of the cases that have happened that there's been basic mimicry and basic communication. When someone tries to flash a flashlight at them, oftentimes they will mimic the exact thing. And this happens all the time with people doing CE5. You know, flashing the laser and the craft will flash back the same amount or move to the location. It happens time and time again. I think there are opportunities and signs that communication is at least worth exploring. And it would be really interesting to see comprehensive tests done to have communication. And I'm kind of surprised that those haven't been done before. I think maybe they've just been ignorant to the power of consciousness in relation to this topic. What do you think about communication and whether we should try to do it and any methods of how we should try?
Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying before, buddy. Governments are kind of narrowly defined in terms of what they do. And they don't.
I lost you there for a second, the audio. I don't know if you were able to hear my question.
Yeah, I did. I heard the question. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Governments are kind of narrowly defined in terms of what they do. And all governments everywhere tend to encourage fear because that's what keeps them in power, is being afraid of the other guy. This is our human history, right? You make the other guy look bad. You hype up the propaganda and make them look like real demons. And you justify the funding and the hatred and the wars. And wars make a lot of money. But I think we can change it. We can turn it around. I know there are people out there that think we're being overly optimistic, but we're living in a different age now. We have the internet, and so far no one's turned it off. Look, we're able to have this conversation right now. You know, in previous times, you and I could have been arrested for having conversations like this. Think about it. It could be considered like anti-patriotic.
Or anti-God.
Yeah, anti-God. And then in a country like the Soviet Union.
Just so you know, we have about 5 minutes, so we close.
They're closing here. We're going to have to cut it off.
Perfect. Perfect. That'll work.
No, you kind of get where I'm going. Now we can do this. I'm not afraid of being arrested for this conversation. So things have changed. I don't care what any of you out there think. It's changed. The fact that we're even doing this right now without any fear of repercussions means
right on.
Changed. And we need to go with the momentum that we've got now and support anyone we know who wants to move to open this up.
Yes.
Like we're saying, and I think that we can do it. I just have to believe we can do it, buddy. We don't have a choice. This is our evolutionary destiny, to go to the stars and to contact other civilizations, just like in Star Trek, to go where no one's gone before. And no one has the right to stop us from this contact, whether it's through CE5 or whatever. It's to. Yeah. So I would say the first step, I love the C5. I've done it many times. I've been out there with Stephen, as I mentioned. I've seen things with Stephen, sometimes things that even seemed a little scary when the lights were coming down. I mentioned the Wyoming incident. But the first step is to remove the fear. Even if it's a scary thing, it doesn't help to be scared when you're encountering it. We have
That's
to
for sure.
grow up and face that we're part of a larger universe, and we have to just deal with it. And it's tough. If you don't like it, nobody said you had to like it. Because we're just going to stay in the same position unless we. So we have to remove the fear. And the only way I know how to do that at a political level is to give people amnesty. I know so many people that would love to come forward and tell us what they've seen, and they're still afraid of losing pensions or getting repercussions one way or another. We got to stop that. That's the first step. And then we can start the communication.
I think,
Buddy, the communication starts with ourselves and with each other. We can't be walking around afraid of talking about this topic and then getting threats like you received a couple of weeks ago. We got to get beyond that. People like doing what you're doing should be supported. I mean, you're doing this on your own dime. You're bringing information to people, and you're doing it in a very conscientious, careful way. And I do it in my own way. This is how it has to be. We're not going back into the closet anymore with this topic. It's just there's too many people. I'm not willing to do it anymore. I've talked to too many witnesses, and the ones who haven't come forward yet should be coming forward.
I think, just the past few minutes of just what you said was just packed with such compassionate wisdom, such pragmatism, and pure logic. And I think it's the kind of logic that really keeps our best future in mind. It's not about any selfishness. It's about the best future for humanity. And, sometimes ignorance is bliss. And we've been living in a certain bliss. When you're a child, before you become an adult, and you don't have bills and you don't have to do all that crap that just sucks as an adult, and you live in this wonderful little world of ignorance. And then you start to grow up a little bit and you realize there's other people out there whose feelings matter. There's a lot more other people out there. There's other countries, there's worlds, there's bills, there's responsibilities, there's all this. And I think it's time for humanity to grow from that like child to an adolescent now and start seeing this bigger world, taking responsibility for cleaning our room, keeping our room clean, taking good care of each other, taking care of our neighbors. And just like Copernicus and those eras of where we had to change our vision of where the earth was, we have to change our vision of where we are in the universe.
Exactly.
And
Exactly right.
And, people like you out there, I'm a little weird, so the really smart, logical people in society probably won't listen to me as much as they'd listen to someone like you, who's a doctor, who's very cogent, who's not as fluffy, weird as I am. But we just need more people out there educating. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate your time, hearing your thoughts on this matter. You make me feel normal. You make these thoughts normal. And every time you talk about them, you make these things normal and less weird to talk about. And, thank you. And, I appreciate your time as always. And I appreciate your cogence.
Well said, buddy. And thank you too. We'll get there. We just have to be persistent here. It's going, there's no other outcome than for this to open up. It's just, we wanted to do it, open up in the best possible way. It's turning on the lights. It could be a new room you didn't see you were in, but we're going to go through this together. We'll be okay. We'll be okay.
That's great. I love that reassurance at the end. We will be okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Hine. Much appreciated.
You too, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll talk soon. Take care, brother.